Hi, Dr. Sykes. Welcome to Vet Inspo Talks. I'm excited to have you, a professor of small animal medicine at the UC Davis Vet School, on the show today, where we'll dive into what it's like to be in academia, how to gain small animal experience/research experience, and the business side of veterinary medicine. So
Thanks very
welcome.
much. Thanks, Ollie. Thanks for the invitation. I'm excited to be here and share my thoughts with you.
Awesome. Can you please tell me a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, I was actually born in Launceston in Tasmania, which is in
Nice.
Australia,
Yeah.
right? Island state of Australia. And then I moved to Melbourne when I was very little and grew up there. And that's where I went to vet school at the University of Melbourne. So I started vet school when I was 17
Oh,
because you could go straight
wow.
from high school into vet school at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I wanted to be a veterinarian when I was just 7 years old. That's the earliest time I can remember. And, you know, I loved animals. I particularly liked cats at that time, but I also had a dog. And so I wanted to be a veterinarian in clinical practice at that time. So I started at vet school, and then about halfway through vet school, my microbiology instructor asked me to do a summer research scholarship.
There you go.
And so I did this summer research scholarship on mycoplasma infections in poultry. So
Okay.
mycoplasma is a little bacteria, and they cause lots of disease in poultry and other animals. And they're very good at evading the host immune system, so they can change their outer surface and evade the immune system to escape detection. So that was my summer research project, was working on these bacteria and looking at how they evaded the immune system. And I actually got some pretty interesting novel results in a short period of time and enjoyed that experience. And so my microbiology professor at the time, Glenn Browning, told me that I should do a PhD after I finished vet school. And that was not really something that I had thought about at the time because I wanted to be in practice.
Right.
And I wanted to do an internship and a residency. And I had met some other specialists in Australia, internal medicine specialists for dogs and cats. And I thought that that was a pretty cool and interesting job. And they had trained in the US. And so I thought, well, maybe I want to do that too, because there weren't really very many opportunities for training in Australia. So my microbiology professor actually convinced me to combine a master's degree with an internship.
Oh, nice.
Straight after vet school, so that I could sort of test both things out at the same time. And it also allowed me to see problems in clinical practice that you could then do research for to better understand. And so I also insisted that I wanted to do a research project on a dog or a cat disease, not a production animal disease, even though I was interested in that. And he said, you know, it's the same principles. I was like, I really want to do research that benefits dogs and cats. So on a very small amount of money, I started a PhD looking at the bugs that cause respiratory disease in cats. And this is when PCR, you know, amplification of DNA, was just starting to be used for a diagnostic testing. It had just been invented. And so there was this opportunity to start using PCR testing to understand these organisms, viruses and bacteria in cats. And I had a cat research colony at the time that I was studying, and I finished my internship, went on to do this PhD, but still really wanted to do this residency after I finished my PhD. And so during my PhD, I had the opportunity to travel around the US and visit different veterinary schools and look at residency training programs. And I also presented my PhD research at one of the main medicine conferences.
That's
The
great.
ACVIM Forum in Florida. That was in 1995, so a long time ago. But I stood up there with my 17 slides.
Wow, that's
and
fantastic.
After my abstract, I had a lot of people come up to me and say that was fantastic, and some people who are now still mentors today that I met at this meeting, and then I knew that I wanted to come here after I finished my PhD. And funnily enough, I did, as part of this big tour, come to Davis And I spent 6 weeks here
Oh, nice.
with Dr. Janet Foley, who's still on faculty at the vet school. She's an ecologist. And we talked a lot about FIP, which is an infectious disease of cats,
Yes.
which she was studying at the time. And I thought, wow, I really want to come to Davis and I want to do a residency here.
Wow.
So I was told, actually, I was informed at the time that there was a very low chance of getting a residency for me because I was coming from Australia.
Yes.
And I also had been out of being in clinics because I was just doing basic research. And so I would be competing with people coming straight out of internships in the United States. And sort of a dismal picture was painted about my chances of coming here. But nevertheless, at the end of my PhD, I applied for residency training programs. And I matched at the University of Minnesota.
Oh, nice.
So that was a big cultural difference, right? Coming from Australia to the upper Midwest.
Yeah, and the freezing cold weather.
Freezing cold weather, yeah. But when I arrived, I instantly met people who are still really, really good friends today. And I was so excited to be here. There was just so much passion and enthusiasm for medicine. And I think being in Minnesota was a good school.
Yeah.
And really great instructors, people who are, very famous in the American College of Veterinary Internal Medicine, who were my mentors.
Nice.
And so I learned a lot from them. And then at the end of my residency training program, I stayed on as a faculty member for a year in clinics, more sort of clinical faculty member, but I still had that desire to do research as part of my career and be in academia, mixing teaching, research, and clinics.
Yeah.
And so as it happened, Dr. Niels Peterson, who was the guy who discovered FIV, feline immunodeficiency virus, he was undergoing a staged retirement, and so they were looking for someone to come in and take over his infectious disease lectures and his clinic position, and so I applied for that position, and that's how I got here.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting journey that you decided to take throughout your vet school experience, your PhD, your master's, and now you ended up here, which is amazing.
That's right. It's pretty funny that I, had this desire to come here and was kind of told that I couldn't, it wouldn't be likely, and now here I am at, the number one vet school, and it's been an amazing 20 years here. So I mostly have focused on infectious diseases of dogs and cats and really developing that as a discipline, because we have specialists in internal medicine.
Right.
We have specialists in cardiology. As you know, we've got lots of different specialists in veterinary medicine, just like they do in human medicine, but we don't have infectious disease specialists. There's no such thing.
Yeah.
And we actually have not had any formal training programs for infectious disease specialists. And so I started to train fellows just informally, like a 2-year fellowship program after people finished their residencies when they were interested in infectious diseases. And I've now trained 4 different fellows.
Wow, nice.
And my fellowship program was just approved as the very first ACVIM approved fellowship.
That's fantastic.
Of any type.
That's amazing.
It's really cool. And now we have a program in place to formally train people and call them a fellow of the ACVIM in infectious diseases. So that's something that I've really wanted for a very long time. So it's very exciting to see that come.
And now
to
you
fruition.
made it happen.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
Great job.
Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah. And then when we're talking about academia, what advice would you recommend to pre-vets or vet students that want to go through this route?
Yeah, well, so I think it's important that you love teaching.
That's
okay,
true.
And I think teaching is really amazing because you are constantly learning from the people that you teach, and there's such energy and enthusiasm among students, and they're so inquiring, right? And so sometimes they're questions that you haven't even thought of yourself that your students ask you, and then so you're learning all the time. So if you want a career where you're just going to be constantly learning and interacting with new people, this is definitely a great career for you. So, I think people who are interested in careers in academia, there's now less emphasis on needing to have a PhD, right?
Yes,
because
that's
that's a
true.
very long pathway now, and it's a very expensive pathway. And if you like research and you want to get a solid grounding in basic science research, then a PhD is a good idea. But there are now other pathways to academia, and we really need more clinician educators in our profession. So we need people who have done residencies and know how to teach, and they might want to do some clinical type research, but you don't necessarily need to have a PhD to get a position like that. So, my advice would be try to get involved in some research, especially research that's being done in a clinical environment, so you can learn about clinical trials and different ways to understand diseases.
Yeah.
And now we have this great big field of precision medicine that's just blowing up, and opportunities for really cool research in that area. So I would say try to get involved in some research projects. We have this program known as Students in Advanced Research, or the STAR program, for our vet students, so they can do summer projects just like the one that I did.
Yeah.
That can really help with that pathway as well.
And how can they find this program?
Yeah, there's information about it on the school's website. There's also posters over in Valley Hall, if you wander through Valley Hall over where the vet school is. So you can learn about the program that way. But yeah, on the school's website would be the best way to get information about it. And there's lots of instructors in the vet school that have ideas for research programs through the STAR program that can help out too. So that's probably the best way to get started, I would say. And then you meet other faculty, and there's the opportunity for master's or PhD training if you want to go down that pathway.
Yeah. And then I also know there's a DVM PhD program as well.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think it's a little bit more, better, or some way, I don't know how to say it, but do you think taking the DVM path first and then completing a PhD afterwards, or do you think combining both at the same time would be more beneficial?
Yeah, I think it depends on the individual who's actually doing it. And so I think that that's a nice way to try to condense it a little bit more and get through that PhD, commit to it. And I think if you're really interested in research and discovery, that is a really great path to follow.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then when talking about small animal and research experiences, someone who is interested in getting in small animal infectious diseases, where can they get started at?
Yeah, well, so that's a good question in terms of infectious diseases.
Yeah.
If you really want to have more formal training in that, it's really taking steps towards getting a residency first in internal medicine. And infectious diseases is not necessarily just about clinical infectious diseases, seeing patients with infectious diseases, but you might be interested in microbiology, for example, like a career in laboratory microbiology. We need microbiologists in our profession too. So there are different types of infectious disease careers.
Okay.
There's, also wildlife health and infections in wildlife. And really important, I think the pandemic showed us that we need veterinarians doing research on infectious diseases that cross human and animal barriers, right? So these zoonoses, or infectious diseases that are transmitted from animals to humans, but also reverse zoonoses, which go back the other way. With the SARS coronavirus 2, we know that it infects a huge variety of different animal species, including dogs and cats, and probably gets transmitted back from dogs and cats, or at least cats to people.
Oh, interesting, yeah.
So, doing research on diseases of humans that also can infect animals is another potential pathway. So that would be more kind of basic science research on infectious diseases. But in terms of clinical infectious diseases, it would be following the career path for residency. And ACVIM, the American College of Veterinary Internal Medicine, which is the training college for internal medicine and ultimately infectious diseases.
Right.
You know, they have student clubs in academia all over the country. So there are student ACVIM clubs. There's one here at UC Davis. So if you're a vet student, you could get involved in that.
There you go,
learn more about what it's like to do a residency and become a specialist. But being a specialist is fantastic, and I think we're also entering a really great time in terms of quality of training programs. There's a lot of interest in making training programs as good as they can possibly be to benefit the person who's going through the training program. So more supervision, more interaction, more care about well-being, right?
That's a huge
and
part.
mental health. There's more interest in diversity and bringing, you know, people of all sorts into the profession. So it's a great time to train to be a specialist and a specialist educator.
There you go. Awesome. I didn't know that.
That's really great.
Fascinating opportunities that there are available everywhere. So that's fantastic. Now let's switch gears. Now let's talk about a little bit more about business. And do you think it's beneficial to acquire an MBA with your veterinary degree if that's something that you want to do in the future?
Yeah. So I took a little bit of a non-traditional path. When I started on faculty at UC Davis, because I was an infectious disease person, I was infection control officer for the hospital for 10 years. So I was involved in, you know, hospital cleaning protocols, contact precautions to prevent transmission of infectious agents around the hospital. And I developed a lot of different protocols surrounding that and posters around the hospital, those types of things, choosing disinfectants. So quite some administrative tasks, if you like. And that led into becoming director of small animal clinic. And so really helping to run and organize the small animal clinic. And then our hospital director started a staged retirement as well, and I stepped into the interim role of hospital director, which was overseeing the entire hospital operation and the diagnostic laboratories and the large animal clinic and the small animal clinic. And then after a year in that role, I applied to be the hospital director itself, which became the chief veterinary medical officer. And all of a sudden, I found myself being an administrator and using skills that I really hadn't been trained in, right? You know, I was responsible for a huge budget and, you know, organizational issues and working with campus. And I thought, wow, I got all this formal training to become a veterinarian, and I'm doing this and I have no formal training in this. And so that's what made me decide to do an MBA. And I had also started a not-for-profit society several years before, which was an infectious disease society. And I could see the value of having business training for, you know, helping to run that operation as well. So I started my MBA at the University of Georgia, and I did that through, you know, distance, part-time learning, and some in person. Every month I was there in person for a few days over an 18-month period. And I chose that program because it had that flexibility that allowed me to work and get the training at the same time. It also had a good reputation. And I expected to get trained mostly in financial skills. And I ended up getting trained in so many other things that have been incredibly valuable to what I do. And even without the hospital director position, I recognize that the things I learned in that program are helpful for everyday life as a veterinarian. And when I trained as a veterinarian, there was no training in business at all during the course. Now at least there's training in business. And there's also optional training that you can do over the summer, right? You can enroll in this summer course. But I really think that probably as time goes on, there'll be more and more business that's incorporated into the course, because it's important for your own mental health and well-being and ability to survive
Yes.
when you get out there and you're running a business. And it might not be necessarily a private practice business. I mean, maybe you're working in laboratory animal medicine, maybe you're doing research and you're running a laboratory. All of those things require these skills that we don't get trained in. So there's more effort in academia to find opportunities to train veterinarians in some of these skills that are going to be essential for them having a career that they're going to stay in right through till retirement, right?
Yeah.
So I'm a big proponent of it. And even though I'm not hospital director anymore, I still use those skills every day. And plus, it was just a great opportunity to go back to school and be the student, looking back at the instructor. And I learned some teaching skills doing that too.
Oh, that's fabulous.
So, I was like, okay, now I'm the student and now I see things from my student's perspective, and it made me a better teacher too.
That's amazing. And do you think those opportunities made you the person that you are today? Without them, it could have been a little bit more different? Yeah?
Yeah, for sure. I think, I probably wouldn't have even thought to go down that path if I hadn't found myself kind of lost in this administrational role. But it's been so good for just me personally and also for career development. And I try to teach some of the things that I learned to veterinary students that are in the course, like that are rotating through clinics. We talk about, how to communicate with owners about their bills and, these things that are really critical. And it's a very stressful career being in practice, and you're often dealing with people who are emotional or upset about their animal. They're financially strained. And there are ways of coping with that if you're given the skills to cope with that, and it can make it a lot more rewarding.
Yeah, that makes sense. Everybody thinks that veterinary medicine is only focusing on the animal's perspective, but that's not true. That's not the case. You have to deal with the clients as well, as you mentioned before. So it's very important to put those two together.
It's really a service career. I mean, you are serving the public if you're working in practice particularly. And so it's a lot about treating the owner as well as the pet.
That's true. Awesome. And then the question that I ask all my speakers is, what would you tell your younger self if you can go back in time, and then why?
Yes. So if I could go back in time, I would tell myself that I should not take on too much at once.
Oh, okay.
And remember that things can get spread out a lot over the course of your career. And I think I learned this by doing my MBA, and I also did a Master's of Public Health after I did my MBA.
Oh, wow.
So you can keep learning and doing new things throughout your career, and you can pace yourself. So you can slow down and make sure you have time to smell the roses, I would say. Take it easy, create some time for yourself, ensure that you're looking for an entire career ahead of yourself, and don't burn yourself out by taking on too much early on. So that's the advice that I would give my younger self.
Yes, a lot of speakers say the same thing. Yeah. I think they say the exact same thing. And it's true. We all stress ourselves out at times, and it's good to take some time off and enjoy our time that we have, throughout our educational journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I've done is been quite involved in the profession through service to the American College of Veterinary Internal Medicine, and so I'm on the board of regents right now for the college. And I really didn't realize all the opportunities that one could obtain by doing that sort of thing. So, exploring different things that you can do as well. Sometimes there are things out there that you don't even know exist. I've been working in innovation and entrepreneurship here on campus, and kind of representing the vet school as it relates to that, and being involved in the Big Bang competitions. And I could never have envisioned that as a vet student. And really no one said, here's the range of things that you can do. Look at all these different opportunities. This career is not just about treating dogs and cats in a practice. And I work a lot with the medical school as well. Like I attend their infectious disease rounds. And so, I'm interacting with the medical profession too, and it's just a fantastic career.
That's amazing.
It's
so
much richer
yeah.
than you can possibly imagine.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today and talking to us about your journey, your experiences, and how we can get involved as future veterinarians, hopefully. And yeah, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, well, thank you for the opportunity. I want to congratulate you for this awesome podcast. I think
Thank
it's
you.
an absolutely fantastic idea.
Thank you
And
so
I would just
much.
encourage anybody who's interested in being a specialist to look at all
Yeah.
the different types of specialists you can be in vet med, and also try to pursue a career teaching students and teaching the next generation, because it's really fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching, and see you next time on Vet Inspo Talks. Bye.
Bye.